Hi, I am 35F and my husband is 41M. We had children quite late into our marriage and they are currently 7F and 6M. I am writing today because my husband has a so-called work wife that I am starting to get worried about. First of all, there has never been a reason for me to not trust my husband until a year ago. All of our years together, and the majority of it being a long-distance relationship as my husband's workplace is quite far away and he sometimes has to stay in his work-appointed housing during his work week, nothing has ever happened for me to lose my trust in him or to even doubt his feelings for me. Except a year ago, when he started talking about Susie all the time. In our relationship, we often talked about how our day went, what happened at work, etc. at the end of the day. It was all pretty normal until he started bringing up Susie, his coworker, all the time and telling me how funny she was. For context, my husband is her manager and in the beginning, I assumed their friendship was completely platonic as she was a fresher when she started at his workplace. There is also a bit of an age difference between them as she's only 28 years old, so I have always just assumed his fondness for her is in a little sister kind of way. Anyway, my husband would tell me how amazing Susie was at work, and how he felt really happy to teach her about the ropes of the job. I didn't really mind that until he started joking that she's his work wife. I knew the concept of a work husband and work wife, and to be frank I have never liked that. I was speechless when he mentioned this and asked him why he would refer to her that way. He then told me that because they spent so much time together, other colleagues started to joke around that they were perfect for each other and would even tell them that they would look good together as a couple. I felt extremely uneasy with the way he described the whole thing to me. I never knew Susie and him were that close, and I had no idea that his coworkers would tease them about it. However, a few months ago, some of his female coworkers started to mention a couple of things to me whenever I went with my husband to his office parties, and it seemed like they were trying to give me the heads up about his and Susie's relationship. For example, they have told me that on several occasions he has answered his internal phone to her with "Hey beautiful" in front of everyone. He's been also heard to throw affectionate comments like "Hey sweetie, I'm not busy, I've always got time for you, how's my work wife, and you shouldn't be so good looking" then while talking with her. As you can imagine, after I came back home, we had a huge fight regarding this. My husband denied saying these things and asked me to stop overreacting and being jealous. I was shocked by the way he kept denying all of these things and trying to turn the table on me. I started shouting at him that I felt humiliated to find out from his female coworkers that he had been calling another woman sweetie and beautiful when he never even used those words for me. My husband retorted that he is friendly with everyone including her and as his wife, I should be supportive of his career. We continued to fight and ultimately I banished him to sleep in the guest room for that night as I could not bear to sleep next to him. The next day, after I dropped the kids at school and both of us had calmed down, my husband sat me down to address my concerns. The first thing I asked him was why would his coworkers tease him about having a work wife when they already knew that he was married. He told me that when Susie started working she had no idea about a lot of things, so she would spend a lot of time shadowing his work and learning from him. Because she was younger than most, he never scolded her if she ever made a mistake. This would make his coworkers, especially his male coworkers who were also his friends, tease him for spending so much time with her. This is how they started to jokingly refer to her as his work wife, and Susie would also refer to him as her work husband. At this point, I felt livid at my husband, his coworkers, and at Susie. I would understand their teasing if they weren't aware of me, but even after knowing their existence, they had decided to come up with such names. I started to cry at this point out of frustration and my husband kept apologizing to me. With tears running down my face, I asked him if he had any feelings for Susie. He immediately denied any such things, telling me that he had never thought of her as anything more than a coworker. He told me that he was sure Susie didn't have feelings for him too because she has a boyfriend. I told him that I didn't believe that Susie didn't have any feelings for him because she had never been friendly with me during his office parties. Looking back, I had never thought much about it, but now I did. He told me that I was reading too much between the lines and that she would never consider him that way when he was much older than her. He also told me that she and he were just friends and it's normal for opposite genders to be friends. Hearing this, I immediately called him out on this, because when I had a job before we had kids, he used to admonish me for talking to any male coworkers by telling me that they may not have good intentions for me and I should keep my distance from them. But now here he was being friends with a female coworker and forcing me to accept it. I asked him if situations were reversed and he was in my shoes, would he be happy to find out I have a work husband, and that I hid this dynamic from him all this time? This is when my husband couldn't even look me in the eye and started to cry with me. He told me how sorry he was for everything and that he slowly saw where I was coming from. He told me until then, he never thought he had done anything wrong, thinking this was all harmless, but now he knows what I feel. He kept apologizing profusely, asking me for another chance. I told him that I wasn't sure as I would have never done this with him. I also went on to tell him that I have always kept strict boundaries with my coworkers and expected him to do the same. I have never been suspicious about him, but what he has done is making me rethink. Hearing this, my husband got down on his knees begging me not to leave him. He told me that he loves me and our children more than anything and is ready to quit his job if that is what it takes to keep our marriage. I told him I was not sure if I could believe that, and he told me that he would do anything to regain my trust back even if it meant starting from zero. I believed him then and decided to give him another chance. I did love my husband and wanted to believe that we could come out of this issue. We started going for marriage counseling to regain our trust, and as promised, my husband kept his distance from Susie. I have since asked some of his female coworkers who are friends with me on Facebook, and they told me how my husband firmly asked Susie to ask a female coworker for help in the future and not come to him for small things. I was happy that he was setting boundaries and everything seemed to be going smoothly. To satisfy my curiosity further, I researched Susie a bit and found out that she had been divorced thrice. This is pretty unbelievable for a 28-year-old woman. I found out that she was originally from Spain and had come to the USA as a 22-year-old only and married her first American husband. She then divorced him and went on to marry 2 other men in the next few years. All of these 3 men were much older than her, so clearly she had no issues with age difference. This made me realize that I was right to ask my husband to stay away from her. This all happened 3 months ago, and since my talk with my husband, we haven't faced any issues until yesterday night. My husband was supposed to come home early for our weekly date night. I was looking forward to spending our time together as I had not seen him all week, and had even made sure that my dad had picked up the kids from school so they could spend the night with my parents while I and my husband could get some alone time. Suddenly the doorbell rang and I excitedly opened it to see my husband standing in the doorway with none other than Susie. It was raining and they were soaking wet. My eyes widened looking at her and I angrily looked at my husband. They both came in and my husband started to say that her car had broken down on the way. She was stranded in the middle of the road and had called him for help while he was on his way back home. They had called AAA for road assistance, but because of the rain and thunderstorms it would have taken a while, so he decided to get her to our place instead of leaving her in the broken down car. After hearing this, I couldn't argue with him as I didn't want to be rude in front of her. I offered her a towel while my husband went to our bedroom to freshen up. I asked Susie if she wanted to have dinner with us and she nodded solemnly. I had prepared to go out for our date night, but now I knew that we wouldn't be able to go out with this unwelcome guest in our house. I reluctantly started preparing dinner for the night. When my husband came down after freshening up, Susie, who was probably waiting for him, told him that she needed to use the washroom too. I told her that she could use our guest washroom, and Susie, without even glancing at me, asked my husband if she could use our master bathroom. He nodded and showed her the way and then came back down to help me out for dinner. I didn't want to be rude in front of her, so I whispered, asking him if she was out of earshot, and he nodded. This is when I started to angrily whisper to him that he should not have brought her back to our place without at least asking me first. He told me how he could not leave her out there in the rain and thought that as a woman I would understand. I told him that while I definitely understood that he wanted to help a woman out, he could have asked her to go back home in a cab instead of bringing her to our place and spoiling our date night. He told me that Susie kept insisting that she was really cold, and as our house was closer than her home, he had decided to bring her here. We kept arguing, but at this point, there was nothing that I could do. Suddenly, Susie started calling for my husband from upstairs, asking him for a fresh towel. I shot my husband a death glare and told him to keep working on the dinner so I could go and see what Susie wanted. I walked up to see her peeping out of the door smiling at me sheepishly. She told me that she wanted a fresh towel to wipe herself off after taking a bath in our washroom and didn't want to inconvenience me as she thought I was busy cooking, so had called for my husband instead. I told her politely that if she needed anything further in our home, she could ask me for it instead of my husband. I then fetched a fresh towel and gave it to her. Meanwhile, my husband had set the table and we eventually sat down for dinner. Susie came out to join us with water still dripping down her hair. She didn't even acknowledge me and walked straight to sit beside my husband. She started asking what was for dinner, and I told her that I had whipped out some pasta as I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for dinner. Her nose scrunched hearing this and she started to laugh, telling me that she expected me to cook something better than just pasta. I stopped eating and looked at her blankly, trying to comprehend what she was trying to insinuate. Susie then asked if this is what I serve to my husband every night when he comes home after a long day's work, and I retorted back that it was none of her business what I served to my husband. Susie snickered at me and turned to look at my husband, telling him that he deserved to be treated better than this. Hearing these words, I got up from my chair. I asked her who she thought she was to speak to me in our house. Susie then started shouting that I was being a bad wife to my husband and probably a bad mother to his children too. She started pointing out how I couldn't even cook him a grand meal when all I did was sit on my ass the whole day as I was just a stay-at-home mother. My eyes widened at this accusation, and my husband, who had remained calm until then, firmly asked Susie to stop talking as what she just told me was out of line. Susie then started to tell him that he deserved a better wife than me who could take care of him and his kids rather than a shoddy housewife like me. I wanted to slap Susie at this point for her accusations, but it was taking all my energy to keep myself calm to not make this situation out of control. I took a deep breath and looked at her squarely in the face. I told her that if she had such a great wife, then she would not have been divorced 3 times in the past 6 years. Susie immediately froze, and I went on to tell her that I knew all about her shoddy past divorces with her 3 ex-husbands, which meant she clearly didn't know how to keep a marriage intact. I told her that I knew all of her ex-husbands had been much older than her, probably the same age as my husband. I went on to tell her that I knew exactly what she was doing and that she was nothing more than just a gold digger. Hearing this, Susie burst out crying. She started shouting that I was an evil person for bringing up her past while I smirked in satisfaction knowing that her secret was out in front of my husband who clearly had no idea about this. I firmly asked her to get out of our house while my husband looked shaken by the whole ordeal. I kicked her out in the rain and closed the door on her while she kept shouting more abuse. She banged on our door and I told her through the intercom that I would not hesitate to call the police if she continued with this antic. Eventually, she must have got a cab or asked her boyfriend to pick her up because she was gone after a while. Since then, I have been completely shaken. Although I did react to her angrily at that time to defend myself, I have no idea why she even got angry at me in the first place. Her words keep going around my head and I can't help but spiral. My husband, for his part, has told me that while he understands the way I reacted, he still thinks that I was too cruel to kick her out in the rain. This has made me even more angry at him as I would have never let someone disrespect him in our home the way Susie behaved with me yesterday. So Reddit Ida for standing up for myself against my husband's so-called work wife? Update 1. Hi everyone, thank you for all your comments and suggestions. I did listen to some of your advice and asked my husband today to show his chats with Susie. At first, he asked me why I wanted to see them, but I kept insisting that I needed to know for sure if they had anything in the past. He reluctantly handed over his phone after we kept arguing, and what I found in his messages were exactly what everyone had warned me about. I went through hundreds of chats that they had previously. While my husband's replies were formal, and not flirty, Susie had always flirted with him from the beginning. My husband seemed respectful to her and answered any queries she asked him. But what shocked me was that 4 months ago, she had sent a suggestive photo of my husband in a very revealing dress. He immediately asked her why she would send something like this, and she asked him if she looked good in the dress as she wanted to surprise her boyfriend. My husband told her that she was extremely beautiful, so she had nothing to be worried about, but in the future, she should not send such pictures to him. She then replied to him with a sad emoji. This interaction between them has me reeling in shock. Although nothing seemed unusual from him, it doesn't relieve the fact that my husband withheld this information from me for so long, even when we had fought over his close relationship with Susie 3 months ago. This means he had always known about her feelings but had tried to gaslight me into thinking that I was overactive and jealous. I am at a loss for words and have asked my husband to give me space so I can deal with my emotions. He keeps pleading with me to not leave him and to think about our kids. He even told me that I could talk to Susie's boyfriend if I wanted to know for sure that Susie and he were never a thing. I have never cried like this in a while, and I never realized how overwhelmed I was with this until now. I have decided to reach out to her boyfriend to see if he wants to talk to me in a last attempt to save my marriage for the sake of my children. Update 2. If you have read my story until now, thank you. I truly appreciate everyone for their kind words. I came to Reddit to vent, not expecting anyone to even read my story, but people from Reddit have taken their time to advise me on various things that are quite helpful. Now, as I had updated before, I did reach out to Susie's boyfriend, Michael, on Facebook. He seemed surprised when I reached out to him as he didn't even know me or my husband existed. After I told him that I wanted to talk to him about something important regarding Susie, he told me that we could meet somewhere near his office. Apparently, he works on weekends and the only time we could meet was during lunch hours. We met at a public park as we both felt that it's awkward to talk about this casually over coffee. I had asked him previously to not mention about our meetup to Susie, so when we met he told me that he was curious as to why he couldn't speak about this with her. This is when I started to tell him the entire story. I first apologized to him for what I had to say. I then told him I knew that it was not my place to be the one to break the news to him, but with how I found out about the relationship between Amy and my ex, I was pretty sure he had no idea of that dynamic too, so I wanted to warn him. Michael looked curiously as I showed him the entire conversation between Susie and my husband. His eyes widened in shock looking at the image she had sent my husband. He then told me that he had no idea about any of this as Susie never even mentioned my husband to him. This was shocking to me, and I went on to tell Michael how Susie referred to my husband as her work husband and their various inappropriate interactions which his female co-workers had told me about. Hearing all this, Michael seemed as angry as me. He told me that he understood where my anger was coming from because he felt the same way after hearing everything about Susie and my husband. Michael also mentioned how distant Susie had been in the past year, and how recently their relationship was starting to get more and more rocky. He had always assumed it was because both of them were working all the time and had no idea that she was this close with my husband. He had been feeling guilty all this while for not giving her enough time. I guess this was the answer he needed to know that it wasn't his fault. We didn't talk long after that. I only said what I had to say, and he thanked me for going out of my way to let him know what was happening behind his back. I am not sure what will happen between them now, and I don't even know what Michael will do after this information. As for my husband, I haven't talked to him for the last couple of days. I am like a zombie who wakes up in the morning for the sake of our children, to get them ready for school, and to drop them off. I then go back into my bed and cry for hours until it's time for my kids to come back home. I don't want my kids to know that something is wrong with me. After talking to Michael, I feel a bit relieved that I helped someone out and at least he won't be blindsided like me. I also feel a bit of clarity as to what I should be doing next. I don't know if I will ever be able to fully forgive my husband after this. He had the chance to come clean to me about all these months ago but chose to keep this a secret. I did want to talk to Susie regarding her behavior towards me, but now I don't even want to do that. After talking to Matt, I have just lost all my energy completely and I want to remove myself from the situation now. I will talk to my parents and see if me and the kids can live with them for a couple of days. I want to heal and move on from this toxicity, but I don't know yet how to do so or what to do next. Update 3. Hi, everyone. A lot has happened in my life since my update last week. Michael texted me during the weekend with the worst possible news. He told me that Susie and my husband had a one-night stand. He told me how Susie told him that she had admitted feelings for my husband, and one evening while working late, they had taken things too far. My immediate reaction was to puke hearing about the affair, as it was what I had always feared. Michael also told me that after that one night, Susie had suggested that they could keep doing this, but my husband had firmly told her that he loved his family and he felt guilty for what he did. Michael sent me screenshots of their messages on Snapchat where my husband had pleaded with her to keep this a secret between them. This had probably made Susie angry, and this explains why she would throw me nasty glances during the office parties whenever my husband would take me. Michael also revealed that Susie had admitted to sending my husband more inappropriate images on his Snapchat, which he didn't refuse initially. It was only after I had my altercation with my husband that he had blocked her on Snapchat, fearing that I might find out. This is also why my husband hesitated to give me his phone when I wanted to check it. Michael decided to break things off with Susie and told me that he wanted to return the favor by telling me the truth about my husband and her. Since finding out about their affair, I can't deny anymore that our marriage has reached its end. I can't deny the fact that my husband did indeed cheat on me physically and emotionally, just like I had feared. I should have left him after his female coworkers warned me, but I foolishly believed his words. I am currently living with my parents, as I had mentioned previously, and they are furious at my husband just like me. My dad has told me that I should leave my cheating scumbag husband to prevent any further heartbreak. I am glad that I have such supportive parents. I have decided to reach out to a lawyer tomorrow to take matters into my own hands. I need to set a better example for my children and be a good parent to them. Both my children and I don't deserve a man like my husband who has been cheating on his family and lying to us all this while. It feels devastating that my marriage is over, but I am learning to be okay with it. I don't want to confront him and argue with him further when I have all this proof of his affair, and I plan to serve him directly with divorce papers when I meet him next. I feel for everyone who has ever gone through something like this, but I assure everyone who has been concerned about me in the comments that me and my children are going to be okay, thanks to the support of my parents. I promise that I will come out of this stronger and will leave this toxicity behind me once and for all.